The Smackdown vs. Raw series is one of my favorite video game series of all time. Just about every game in the series is just so damn good, and even the ones that aren't all that great, like Smackdown vs. Raw 2010, still have a certain charm to them that make them fun. Then, on the other hand, there's Smackdown vs. Raw 2009, a game so forgettable that it always ends up getting left out of the conversation whenever Smackdown vs. Raw is brought up. Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 was released in November of 2008 and immediately lost any chance of being successful since it released just 3 days before Call of Duty World at War. Well, no wonder why nobody remembers this game anymore, because they only had 3 days to play it before the biggest Call of Duty game of all time launched. Now, even if Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 had launched somewhere around like October, in turn giving it more breathing room, I still don't think it would have done all that well. Smackdown vs. Raw 2008 was already disliked by many due to the lack of content like a season mode and the overall decrease in quality in the GM mode, so why would people have any reason to believe that the next game would be that much of an improvement? But by the time the game dropped, it was clear that people had every right to be skeptical, as there was really nothing to the game whatsoever. The game lacked a lot of content, as there was no GM mode or season mode this time around. The game only had 2 backstage brawl arenas, and it was missing match types such as Buried Alive that were still present in the previous game. All of these things, combined with the fact that the game had to be cut down on purpose to make room for Legends of WrestleMania, which would release in March of 2009, showed that SVR 2009 wasn't really worth playing in any capacity. What you're getting here isn't a full game, you're getting half an experience, and if you didn't have Legends of WrestleMania back in the day to go with this game, then you weren't getting the entire Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 experience. Anyways, with all that out of the way, I think it's time we take a look at what I consider to be the strongest part of the game, the gameplay. Smackdown vs. Raw 2009's gameplay is just about as fun as you would expect it to be. Part of the reason this game's gameplay was so good is because they got rid of the weird fighting styles mechanic that everyone hated in SVR 08. So because of that, the gameplay definitely felt a lot better in 09. The actual wrestling in this game is super fast and fluid, and it's legitimately really fun. Everything from striking to grapple moves and finishers just feels incredibly satisfying, because not only is every animation super smooth and fast, but every move feels like they actually have weight and impact to them. When you strike your opponent or hit them with a weapon, you can really feel the impact of the move, which is always nice in a wrestling game. As I said too, finishers also feel really good in this game, and it mostly just boils down to the awesome glass breaking effect that happens when you pull one off. SVR 09's gameplay at its core is pretty much the same thing as 07 and 06, which is why it's so fun. One of the other reasons this gameplay is so good is because it gives you a ton of freedom to do whatever you want. You can climb on top of the announce table, do high flying finishers off the announce table, and even do crazy ass dives off of ladders that really shouldn't be possible in the slightest. It's stuff like this that I absolutely love in my wrestling games, and it's the main reason why I believe that this game's gameplay is the best thing it has going for it. It even brought back the hardcore resurrection ability from SVR 08, which allows you to make yourself bleed with a chair when playing as an ECW superstar. Speaking of ECW, a lot of those extreme elements from 08 were brought back, such as the ability to ignite weapons like the barbed wire plank of wood, which is just so much fun to do. Outside of that, while the core gameplay is as fun as it is, unfortunately, it's not all perfect. Crowd fighting, which was included in 08, is unfortunately absent here, and for some reason in the Wii version of the game, they decided to include thumbtacks, which are nowhere to be seen in the 360 and PS3 versions. Now sure, these may seem like minor things, but for how much this game is lacking in content, I really do feel like both of those things would have helped in making this game more replayable. That's about it though as far as the gameplay goes, so how about we move on to the roster? Well, unfortunately the roster is one of the weakest parts of this game, as it feels like the most nothing roster of all time. I mean, yeah, it's got just about everyone you'd expect from this time period, but you can tell they were really struggling, as some of these inclusions just felt like padding. Masked Man? Really? That's who you included in the roster? Some generic character made just for Road to WrestleMania? Aside from the obvious padding, something else you may notice about SVR 09's roster is that there's a lack of legends. Why is this, you may ask? Well, that's because they wanted you to buy Legends of WrestleMania, and if they had put Legends in this game, well, Legends of WrestleMania might as well not have existed. They should have just put Legends in SBR9. Who the hell wanted to buy a whole new game just for the sake of being able to play as WWE Legends? To me, that just doesn't seem worth it. I mean, there's a whole game right there that you could have put Legends into, but for whatever reason, Ukes and THQ thought, yeah, you know what people need? A Legends-focused wrestling game that severely affects the quality of our mainline entry in our long-running series. Well, at least you're able to play as a zombie version of Santino Marella, so thank God for that. I will admit that is pretty cool, though. Moving on to the arena selection and match types, there's really not much to talk about. All the arenas are about what you would expect, all of which just being 2008 era shows, and the match type selection is so incredibly basic that I don't think there's anything I can really say about it. I mean, the ECW Extreme Rules match is cool, but it's nothing that really blows me away or anything, and the Hell in a Cell match is fun, but I mean, there's really nothing else that makes this match type selection unique or interesting. Sure, you have the Inferno match included in the game, but the Buried Alive match for whatever reason is just gone, which makes zero sense. It was in 08, so why not include it in 09? Overall, to end off this portion of the video, while the gameplay is incredibly fun, the arena selection and match types just are not all that impressive and don't do much to improve over what SBR08 had on offer. If anything, those two things alone make the game feel like a step back from 08, which at that point begs the question, why not just stick to 08 instead of playing this game? Well, if you stuck to playing Smackdown vs. Raw 2008, you wouldn't get to experience the new mode that 09 had to offer, Road to WrestleMania. Road to WrestleMania is a mode that debuted here in SBR 09 and was pretty much the replacement for the season mode and 24/7 mode going forward into the later SBR games. Essentially, the mode allows you to play through 6 unique stories, each following a different superstar on their road to WrestleMania. The stories the game gives you, for what they're worth, are pretty solid. Sure, they're a little dumb at times, but for this being their first attempt at the road to WrestleMania concept, I'd say they hit it out of the park. As usual, I'm not going to go in depth into all of the stories as that would take far too long, but I mean, come on, Undertaker's story is zombies, the Boogeyman straight up killing people, and it gave us the Boogeyman versus Undertaker match we never got on TV. Honestly, what more could you ask for from a story mode in a wrestling game? Well, what else is there to talk about outside of Road to WrestleMania? Well, I'm glad you asked, because this game's other featured replacement for the season mode is the career mode, and it's not very good. Essentially, for the career mode, you pick a superstar, then start your path to win whatever championship is on your current brand. That's basically the entire mode, and there's hardly any depth to it. There's a reason this mode is hidden under the game mode section and not front and center in the main menu with everything else. I bet some of you might not have even been aware that this game had a career mode, and I wouldn't blame you for that. It's easily one of the most forgettable modes in the entire game, and the fact that it was left behind in SBR 2011 should tell you everything you need to know about the mode. Overall, there's not much else to really say when it comes to this game. Smackdown vs. Raw 2009 just isn't very good, but it's still not the worst wrestling game I've ever played. Sure, it's lacking a ton of content that made the games released before it so good, but the gameplay is still really fun. Plus, Road to WrestleMania is a damn good time, and because of that, I still think there's some value to the game. Now sure, good gameplay in one game mode can only get you so far, but at the end of the day, I've come to the realization that maybe I was too harsh in this game. There are things that I do like about this game, and even the soundtrack is pretty good. Not as good as 07's, but I mean, it's a good soundtrack nonetheless. The game, overall, isn't that bad necessarily, but it's still not that great of a game, and that's okay. If you like Smackdown vs. Raw 2009, all power to you, but if you were to say this is your favorite wrestling game of all time, I don't think I'd believe you.